Welcome, everyone. Welcome back to the City, the State, and True to Yourself podcast. I'm your host here, Tex Wambui. And on this podcast, we just talk about anything. And today we have a special guest, Steve. He's joining us to discuss the world of AI and how it's creating for individuals and businesses alike. And Steve has been at the forefront of AI, helping organizations integrate it effectively. So we'll be diving into how AI can be a force for good, turning disruption into opportunity, and how it's accessible to all. Steve, thank you for being here. Could you start by telling us a little bit about your background, who you are, and kind of what has led you to focus on AI?
Yeah, sure. First of all, thanks for having me. Great to be here. Excited for the conversation. I usually start my story with I was a lawyer for exactly 1 week. That's a true story for another day. Got into digital marketing right after that, ran a marketing agency for about 10 years, then ran an e-learning company called Read It For Me for the next 10 years. Fast forward, which was basically taking leadership and business content and summarizing it into digestible 10 to 15 minute chunks for busy people. And fast forward to November 2022, which was when ChatGPT first came out, we realized very quickly that our business model, the e-learning business model, was going to get disrupted significantly. And so we dove headfirst into try to learn as much as we could about AI, what that means for the future of business education in general. And since then, we've launched both a school, essentially a business school for professionals wanting to embed AI into their day-to-day. And we've also created a consultancy, and we've got about 120 consultants now that we go out and do work for organizations, essentially helping organizations adopt AI, specifically generative AI, and then to help their employees do their jobs faster and easier. So we've been kind of deep in the space since November 2022, which was obviously not that long ago, but it feels like it's been not 2 years, but it feels like 20. But I'm sure we'll dive into some of the details as we work through the conversation.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. So first, let's turn into our first topic regarding to turning disruption into opportunity and highlighting the challenges of how AI can lead to growth and innovation. And I've looked at some of your work, and there's also been some mentions that people have had in terms of the setbacks in AI can become pathways to innovation. Could you share a time when a challenge with AI actually led to something that's a successful outcome?
Yeah, I think the biggest story was our e-learning company at the time was actually not doing well already. And so for us, it was a situation where something that was going poorly was about to get much, much worse. And so we had no choice but to pivot our business towards what we would now consider our core business, which is figuring out what an e-learning company looks like in the future. And I think that's something that's going to continue to happen to different people and different organizations as time goes on. The saying that we like to repeat at Simple is the future is here, it's just not evenly distributed yet, which means that all industries are going to be disrupted by AI. It's just clear that already most, especially, knowledge work can be done faster and easier with AI. And as soon as organizations figure out how to do that, every role and every job is going to ultimately be disrupted. And so I think we've noticed as time goes on, there's what we call these 5 stages of AI transformation in individuals. And usually it starts off with either indifference to AI. So if you're listening to this and you're not fully immersed using AI in your role, or maybe you think that it is not going to be applicable to your role, it starts off with indifference, and sometimes there's active resistance to AI. So in a lot of different fields, people will tell you that, well, there's no way AI is going to replace my job as a copywriter, a graphic designer, a lawyer, whatever it is. And until they see part of their job, which previously was part of their core identity, being done by this, what is essentially a computer and a server doing the work much more quickly than they would have done it, and at a quality level that is as high or better than they would have done it, then it quickly turns into fear, which is where I was in November 2022, because I could at that time just type into ChatGPT, give me a summary of, insert book title of business book here, which previously would take me several hours to go read the book and create a summary, and that work was kind of wrapped up into my identity. Then it was like, seeing for the first time that what I had spent in my entire career building up to do well was just going to get wiped away. So then you got a choice to make at that point, which is either I'm going to take this on and I'm going to embrace the process, which is just going to happen anyways, or you resist and decide not to move forward. So we can talk more about the other stages, which goes into the first time you use AI and you actually hand in a piece of work at work that was generated by AI. There's this embarrassment level that people go through. So it's just a natural stage that people go through of like, I'm embarrassed to submit this as AI produced work, but it's good, and so that's not going to do it. Then once they get over the embarrassment, they go to productivity. And then ultimately what we have seen over the last 2 years is that folks who actively take this on and find as many ways as possible to use AI in their role is that they ultimately become more promotable in their organizations, and they ultimately get the next job that they're trying to work hard towards. And so what we have seen is kind of like the exact opposite. Most people think that if I do my job with AI, the company will replace me. And in fact, if what we have seen is that if you do your job with AI, the company or the organization where you work is more likely to promote you because you're now one of their best employees. And so that's kind of the journey that we have seen. So the fear, and I'm sure there will be some cases where organizations, just get rid of entire departments because that's part of what organizations do. But for the most part, I would say that this is an enormous opportunity for people to become, faster than anybody else in the organization, the most valuable employee that the organization has. So that's kind of what we've seen, and would encourage everybody who is listening to take that on as like you're going to need to pivot at some point if you haven't already. And the faster you make it through these stages, the better off your ultimate career is going to be.
Wow, that's interesting, because I'll definitely say I was actually kind of resistant to it when AI first came out, and I was very hesitant to using it. But over time, I came to understand the effectiveness and the streamlining of the process it made for even being in school, working, and writing things. It allowed for a faster process. Now, you shared kind of like some of the different surprising insights from people using this experience in terms of having them see the ability to work faster, more productive. So how can individuals and small businesses kind of adopt this similar mindset when facing these disruptions related to AI?
Well, I think the big thing for most folks is that, there's an idea that you don't learn how to ride a bike in a seminar. You learn how to ride a bike by getting on the bike and seeing how it goes and adjusting. And ultimately, it's something that's got to get into your muscles, so to speak. And so the biggest mistake I see organizations making is that they are not giving access to the tools to their employees, or when they're getting training for their employees, there is a lot of theory. And ultimately what you want is people getting into this tool, seeing as quickly as humanly possible that this is a tool that's going to help me do my job faster and easier. And the sooner within the training that happens, the better. And so ultimately that's the trick, which is clearly helping everybody in the organization see where the AI would be useful across their role responsibilities. As an example, so you can pull out your job description. It's probably got several role responsibilities, the stuff that you do day to day. It is helpful across all of that work. And the question is not, and this is a mindset thing, the question is that not if it's going to help, but how is it going to help? And if you take that mindset and just approach it like, if the first time I try to use the AI and it doesn't give me exactly what I want, don't dismiss it as though the problem is with the AI. The problem is with how you are interacting with it. And so that is just what we've seen, that the folks who take that mindset of, I got to figure out how this can help me with insert role responsibility here, are the people who ultimately make the most progress. It's mostly this was what we like to say when we go into organizations. This is not a technology problem. This is a psychology problem. This is about changing behaviors of people rather than the technology, because the technology is already there. It is helpful in every single role in every single organization. The only question is how do you help people figure that out? So that's what I would say the most important thing for organizations to take on would be. And then, which is this always true in behavior change or organizational change ideas, is that you need leadership buy-in. If the leaders don't take it seriously, nobody else in the organization is going to take it seriously. So having it come from the top and having at least some of your senior leaders to be an active participant in the process, because actually the senior leaders probably need it the most, if we're being honest. So that is, I would say, a few of the things that are really important for organizational adoption of AI.
Yeah, let's we'll touch on the human aspect in just a few. But right now, let's kind of just dive into now how AI for our businesses is something that can be used effectively. What would you say are like some of the most impactful yet simple ways small businesses can start integrating AI, as well as is there any success stories of small or mid-sized companies that have seen really big wins when they start using AI, from leadership to anybody else within the organization, affordable as well as practical it can be?
Yeah, so it's hard to narrow down to like one specific thing, but I'll tell you a story. So I just got an email this morning from one of our consultants who's working with a construction design company, like a design build company, small to mid-sized organization. I think they've got about 100 employees. And at first, they're just like everybody else, they're very resistant to using AI. And as we found out today, there's so many different ways in which this has been useful for them. They've used it across project management and risk assessment. They've used it inside of financial analysis and budgeting. They've created standard operating procedures and documentation that didn't exist before. They used it for client engagement and marketing. They use it in the procurement and their supply chain. So really across the board, they've used it, and they really, for the folks who were in the cohort of the training, which were mostly leaders inside the organization, they've generated a significant increase in resource optimization. There's a bunch of cost savings. There was efficiencies. There was reduced downtime in their system. So what we've found again is that ultimately across the board, it is useful. And when you give a new tool to people who are motivated and smart and intelligent and hardworking, that the results will just happen. And so again, it's more about a behavior change problem than it is about a tools and technology problem. And we see that across all of the clients that we work with. We like to say that we have a training program, and after the first session, we see on average about $4,000 in productivity gains per employee. And so the ROI bar is almost always met, even just after 1 hour session. And so then, of course, the gains continue from there. So in terms of affordability, the ROI that we are able to produce for clients, and again, it's partly what we do, and we've got a very specific way in which we approach it. It's the tools are there, they work, and if you get your organization engaged in the process, the ROI is it's an easy win. It'll just happen. And so I think for business owners, that's probably one of the biggest things, is to understand that this is true. There is no doubt that if you go through and learn how to methodically apply this across everything you do in your business, you will generate massive productivity gains and thus equip your organization to do much, much more of whatever it is you're already trying to do. And so that's, I would say, one of the critical things for business is this is not some other, like this other thing that they're bringing into their business. This is just a tool. The tool is incredibly useful, and the sooner you get started using it, the better.
Wow, that's a really good story to share, and I hope listeners from various fields can kind of see an example like that, and see the importance that it has in terms of it's affordable, practical, and it does have some great returns from a large scale of things. Now let's kind of transition now into the human potential rather than replacing it. There's a common concern that AI might replace jobs. So how do you see AI's roles in enhancing human capabilities instead? Because I had actually a guest on here previously who was talking about how AI is going to replace people from their jobs. People are going to not be hired. So how can AI be used as a tool that complements rather than competes with the human abilities?
Yeah, I think so. For every major technology shift that's ever happened in the history of the world, it goes through a cycle. Like this has happened before, right? So some jobs will be eliminated, but what ultimately happens is the people in those jobs get reskilled or upskilled into a new, and there's going to be a whole bunch of new jobs that are created of doing things that previously we would not have considered jobs because they just weren't things that companies needed done. So I think the only way you can lose in this game as a human being is to ignore it. If you ignore it and you're caught up in some of the roles that will just get eliminated through AI, which is true, like some roles will no longer exist, then if you are continually upskilling yourself, paying attention to how this can be useful, even if that role gets eliminated, if you have demonstrated to the organization that you are flexible, you're worried about how the organization can do things more productively, like they will train you for a new role. The people who are in trouble are the people who will resist and hold on to the past. That's why it's so important to get past that first stage of resistance to this technology. And then from there, I don't want to use a cliche, but like the sky is the limit for what you can do inside of the organization to help create the new role for you inside of that organization. And so will AI replace some jobs? Yes. Will a bunch of other new jobs come and take their place? Yes. And I think just if you look at the way history has gone, there's always a fear that the new technology is going to replace human beings, and we are just an adaptable species, and we will figure out how to add value on top of whatever tools are there. And I think that's true of this technology, and of course, time will tell. But from what we have seen, the people who adopt this, the organizations want them sticking around, and so that's the key. I think if you ignore it and you're fearful of it, that might spell trouble for you in the long run. And of course, all of this takes time to filter out throughout society. They're like, again, the idea that the future is here is just not evenly distributed yet. It's like every job that currently exists on the planet is not going to go out of existence overnight. It's going to take time. So you got a lot of time. Like there's more time than you think, but there's also less time than you think. At the same time, if you can hold both of those ideas in your head at once, that's kind of the dynamic. The sooner you get started, the better. But nothing is going to change overnight.
Yeah, it's really important to touch upon, especially in a thriving, changing world, and based upon like the skill-based theory in economics. The more skills you're able to develop in economics, more likely you're to be somebody who's preferred within a role. So would you be able to provide like the common person, somebody, let's say, who works at a fast food chain or just a regular common sales associate, with actionable strategies to kind of stay ahead in an AI-powered landscape in terms of what skills would you say are essential for them to thrive with all these AI advancements? Essentially, because we are in a thriving, changing world. So how can listeners from those backgrounds kind of stay ahead of this in fear of their job being replaced?
Yeah, I think a couple of things that they can do. One is go to AI, go to ChatGPT or Claude or whatever large language model tool that you're using, and ask the AI like how do you think I can use AI in my role? Here's my role. Here's my role title. Give me a bunch of ways to use AI in my role. Treat it like an assistant that walked in the doors that says, "I'm here to serve you. What can I do for you?" And then you tell it what you do, and it'll start to generate ideas for you. So that's number one. Number two, then once it starts to tell you, well, how it can help, it will say, well, let's actually help me do whatever, this task is that I got to do right now, and continue to have what we would call this AI first mindset. So whatever it is you're doing right now, the next task you pick up at work, go think about how could I use AI to do this faster and easier. If you cannot come up with an idea on your own about how you can do that task faster and easier with AI, of course, the next step is, well, go ask AI how it can help you do that thing faster and easier. And I did, for the first year that we were deep into AI, I would do these coaching calls, and I still do them to this day, but it was especially apparent in the first year where people would come to me and say, can AI do X? Can AI do Y? And I would always tell them, like, who do you think you should ask that question to? And it's like, the light bulb would go off for them. It was like, well, I should ask the AI what the AI can do. And the AI will tell you what it can do. And so it's that dynamic, and it just takes time, takes repetitions. Again, like riding a bike, the first time it's an obvious thought, but you won't naturally do it as a habit. So I think just naturally continuing to go in and try to see how that AI can help you in that task is going to be very important. Because one of the things that most people don't know or understand immediately about AI is that these companies that make these models, they don't know what these things can do. They make them, they put them out into the marketplace. These models are general purpose technologies, which means they can do millions of things. And they just don't know when they release. They have some idea of things that they can do, but they don't know all of, if you imagine, I did this calculation yesterday. If you broke down how many roles there are on the planet, and then you also created another slice for, industry type, because, a marketing manager in one industry is going to be way different than a marketing manager in another. Then you also layer on the company size, because a marketing manager in a 5,000 person company is going to be different than a marketing manager in a 50 person company. So there's all of these that I calculated somewhere in the neighborhood of 5 million different roles that exist on the planet. There's no way that the people at OpenAI or Google know exactly how all of the ways in which these tools can be useful across all those roles. So it's upon the person who's in the role to go figure it out. And the sooner you figure it out with that AI mindset is like, I know that it can be useful across every single deliverable that I need to create in my role. And then you go and ask, and then you just get into this routine of continuing to explore it. And the people who do that are the people who figure it out. So it's more about making a decision. Again, back, and I don't want to oversimplify it. The decision is like, I will figure out how this can be useful in my role, and I won't stop until I'm done. Then it is about tips and tricks on how to use ChatGPT. It's a mindset, and the faster you adopt that mindset, the faster you can make progress.
Yeah, it's really important to touch on. And I think to build off of that, I think this shows that AI is within reach for everyone. It's not just within reach for large corporations. And, for those people who might feel intimidated by AI, it's a user-friendly tool. And it's not only ChatGPT, there's plenty of other options that people can start using for that. And I think for the listeners, I think it's really important to leave them with a sense of empowerment and understand that AI tools are more often accessible than people realize. So in regards to that, let's kind of shift down to like the cultural impact and the global perspective that AI has. You touched upon how people can use AI regardless of their technical expertise. And so how AI interacts with diverse cultures and values. AI is having a global impact, and it often reflects local values. Have you seen AI applied differently across cultures? And are there any culture considerations in AI development that you think are crucial for the global audience?
When you say culture, maybe define it a little more specifically for me.
In terms of in the professional culture, in terms of how people can use it in their professional life, in terms of work, as well as how they can use it in terms of their personal life. Some people might, for example, somebody might be trying to plan a birthday party, but they have no idea how to plan the birthday party. How can they use like AI to go and say, hey, I need help in planning a birthday party, or I need help creating a recipe book, or doing some things like this, or just a plethora of things that is just in a common daily life of things. So that's what I mean in terms of the cultural impact.
Yeah, so I think you just said it right there. It's like what most people don't understand about AI is that you just need to tell it what you want in plain English or in plain whatever language you speak, right? So you just already gave me multiple examples. Like I'm planning a birthday party. How can I help? Whatever it is, it doesn't matter what that is the start. So you go to it and you say, I'm planning a birthday party. Help me plan this birthday party. Because at the end of the day, one of the things that we've found helpful for people is to think about it in terms of deliverables. So like a deliverable would be like your grocery list. You make a list before you go to the grocery store so you can cross it off when you get there, right? And you have these menus in your head. So that maybe is an example to use. Is when it ends up, every knowledge work process ends up in some way into a deliverable, whether it's a document, and you would do this work in your daily work. You're creating these documents, you send them to people in your organization. That's a deliverable. And if you deconstruct it from that point of view, like I need to send out invitations to this birthday party I'm hosting, I need to create the menu, to then go create a grocery list to make sure that the party is stocked with all the things, like whatever it is that you're doing that results in a deliverable, the AI can help you do that deliverable faster and easier. And so I think once you start to adopt that AI first mindset, which is whatever it is that I'm doing right now, how can AI be helpful in getting this task done faster and easier? You will just start to naturally use it, and people naturally will bring it into their personal life. They will naturally. So we have a daughter who is learning how to drive. And so my wife created a driving plan for her. Like, let's create a driving plan to teach her all the things that she needs to do before she gets her license. So again, it's a mindset of this tool is helpful for any cognitive process that we run. And as soon as you start to see it and where it actually is useful, I think that's really the magical moment for people, is when it does something that just makes things easier for them, then people fall in love with the tool and they start using it everywhere. So yeah, I think this is just going to be a tool that is ubiquitous. You use it in your personal life, you use it at work. And again, once you figure out that this thing can be useful everywhere, you'll just see it adopted across every task that you do. And so I don't know if I answered your question about culturally, how is this making an impact, but I think just at the end of the day, everybody will use this everywhere.
Yeah, you touched upon it, and the biggest thing I would say is that it does make things easier, and it allows for an easy approach to things. And now, since we're on the Staying True to Yourself podcast, it's mainly about, sometimes it's usually about people talking about their journeys and narratives. And you're an expert in the AI field, so let's kind of now delve into how you use AI for yourself, in terms of what are some of your favorite AI tools. What do you like to use it for? For example, for me, I love using ChatGPT. After I learned how to use it, I was like, wow, this is amazing. Also, even in editing some of the podcast videos, I sometimes use an AI tool to use it. So what are some of your go-to AI platforms that you feel like everybody else can have access to, and how they can also learn to use those things?
Yeah, so we have this idea that we call the modern AI tech stack. So there are a bunch of different ways that people are going to be using AI. One is everybody will have what we call a base LLM, which is ChatGPT. It's Copilot from Microsoft. It's Claude by Anthropic. It's Gemini by Google. So there are a small handful of base model LLMs, and then everybody is going to pick one, and they're going to pick one because their work decided for them, this is the tool that this organization is going to use, or they pick it because they like whichever tool they're using the most. And so I use ChatGPT as my base model LLM just because it's the most user-friendly. It has the most advanced features when it comes to, they just released reasoning models, and so it can do a lot of things that the other tools currently are not as good at. But ultimately, it probably doesn't matter that much which one base model LLM you pick. Pick one that you like and then use it. Then on top of that are specialized AI workflow tools. So you probably use some of those in like the editing of your podcast. So other organizations, typically most other AI tools besides those base model LLMs that we just discussed are built on top of base model LLMs. So they basically take a workflow and layer it on top of the base model LLM. So podcasting software, all the marketing software you see out there is based on one of the main models, and so on. And so people will find, and companies will build these software tools that make workflows that are more that are easier for people to use than they could do with the base model LLM. So then ultimately the third level is like every other piece of software that you use is ultimately going to be infused with AI. So like any spreadsheet tool you use will have AI in it. Any word processor that you use will have AI in it, and so on. So everything will have AI in it eventually, and it's just a matter of time to see all those things play out. So I think for me, I actually only, for the most part, I only use ChatGPT. I don't use any specialized workflow tools. Of course, I use whatever tools I have at my disposal that are baking AI into those things. But I spend most of my time trying to get the most out of the base model LLM, because I find that just to be the most productive thing for me in my day to day. So I use it to brainstorm. I use it to write the bio to send to the podcast that I'm going on to. So the big tasks, little tasks, we do it to create strategic plans, draft business strategy. So it's kind of like from all the way up to like the most highest level work that we do, all the way down to tasks that we're compressing from which otherwise would take us minutes, but takes us seconds. So all we're trying to do is use it everywhere, learn where it works well, where it doesn't work well, because there's some areas where it doesn't. You'll find that as you explore, you'll find, well, it doesn't do very well today for this one particular task that I'm using. So ultimately, at the end of the day, it's going to be a dynamic dance, so to speak, with those base model LLMs, the specialized workflows, and then ultimately every other software that you use. So I always encourage people to look at all the other tools that are out there, especially the specialized, anything that's being pitched to you as an AI tool. I would try to reverse engineer how they did it and try to get the base model LLM to do that thing instead, because that's ultimately how you'll start to learn the capabilities of these tools, because all that those companies are doing is making a workflow easier. So anyways, that's kind of a quick glimpse into how I use AI on a daily basis.
Thank you for sharing that. Well, as you were saying, actually, I was thinking about, what about for like that student who has this massive paper they have to write? What advice would you give to them in terms of how they can leverage AI in completing their research, and eliminating that fear of like plagiarism or being caught for using AI platforms? What advice would you give to them?
Yeah, so I think ultimately you can't just have the AI write your paper, right? That's what individuals are worried, like students are worried about. That's what the teachers are worried about. And there's this fear, like that's what, and obviously some people will do that because and people cheat all the time, right? Like that's not new. People will figure out ways to cheat. However, if you deconstructed the process of writing an essay, you'll find that there's a whole host of steps that lead into it. There's research that you have to do. There's the creation of ideas, brainstorming, critically thinking about an issue. So if you deconstruct it all, and by the way, you could go ask the AI, like, create a work instruction for writing an essay, and it'll break it down for you. Like, here are all the areas in which, like, the tasks that need to happen in order to write an essay. And the trick is to use AI in all of those things. And what teachers usually don't want to lose in the process is the critical thinking aspect of it, right? We want people to show their work. We want them to do the work. And to limit somebody from using a tool that's going to help, I would suggest to you that probably my biggest use case of AI is in critical thinking. Like, it is probably the most useful thing to me in my entire business, is it helps me think critically through issues. And so I think that's going to be probably one of the most important meta level skills. And like I said, I have a 15-year-old daughter who's going to be in the workforce within the next, let's say, it's probably a little bit longer than that, 8 years. Like, I worry about that she's going to go graduate and she's not going to have been taught how to use these tools productively in a way that, what I always tell her is, stay within the box. Don't break the rules. The trick here is to, how can it help you do the things leading up to the end result that ultimately you want to produce? Because ultimately, when you get out in the workforce, companies just want the job done in every single role. And all they care about is who can do this job the best. And then all other things being equal, who can do it the fastest. That's all, like that, jobs and promotions and all those kinds of things. So I think there's just a generalized fear that it's going to help people cheat, but ultimately I think the people who take this on in the best possible way will learn that these tools are actually tools to help every step of that process, and that is the critical thinking process. So anyways, that's a little bit of me and my soapbox around education, but I think that will just eventually work itself out, because the the workforce does not care if you used AI to do the task. Like they don't care that they actually want you to do things more efficiently, I guess is the point.
Yeah, you touched upon a really great aspect, the critical thinking aspect, which is uh, used across your work, school, anything else that you're doing. That was some really amazing, actionable advice and encouragement for listeners interested in AI. I want to be respectful of your time, so we'll be coming here to an end soon. So for anyone listening who is intrigued by AI but unsure where to start, what would be your advice on that in terms of how they can now take the steps to ensure from the small scale to the large scale abilities that they have to be able to adjust to this changing world in terms of technology?
Yeah, I think there are two things to point out. One is, again, the best possible place you can go to learn about AI is to go use AI. That's number one. It is going to become your teacher, your mentor, your trainer. All the things that you need in order to be successful with AI are actually already in the AI. That's number one. Number two, if you want some additional help to navigate how would you like to apply AI to your job or your future, we would love to hear from you. You can go to simpleacademy.ai if you're interested just about learning about AI and how you can use it productively in your role or in a future role. And if you're interested in learning about more about how you can become a consultant to help other organizations bring this into their business, we'd love to see you at Simple Consultants.
Thank you, Steve, for sharing your valuable insights. It's been a pleasure having you on this city platform, but I do have some few questions before we get out of here that pertain to the whole stay into yourself aspect. So if you had a quote for yourself that you wanted your name at the end of it, what would your quote be?
That's a really good question. Like a quote that something that I've said that I'd want people to remember. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, like a quote that you feel like, I want this quote to be what people remember me.
No one's ever asked me that question before, and I'm going to probably flub this one. But there was a quote that I read by Charlie Munger, who's one of my, I guess, business heroes, thinking heroes. And I flipped open to a page one time, and it said that, and this is not even his quote. I think it was a quote that he was quoting from Huxley, which was, the most valuable result of all education is the ability to do the thing you need to do when it needs to be done, whether you like it or not. And so education for me is about the doing of the thing. So I think for the most part in society, we spend way too much time putting knowledge into people's heads, and we don't teach enough about how people can actually use that knowledge and apply it to the real world. And so for me, so you've given me some homework. I'm going to think about what is one quote I would like everybody to remember me by. But it's going to be some version of that, which is it is not enough to know the thing. You have to do it, and ultimately that's the whole game. So, and I think that's true of AI. I think it's always been true. But the people who figure out how to do now in this stage, because the advantage is so great, will be the ones that win.
What I took away from that is be practical. And I think with AIs, people can actually be very practical now for it. So thank you for everyone who's tuning in to this episode. We hope you're feeling inspired and ready to explore the AI new ways. And go check out simpleacademy.ai. And also don't forget to reach out to Steve. Is there any way people can reach out to you, Steve, if they have any questions?
Like I said, just go ahead and check out simpleacademy.ai or simpleconsultants.ai, and you will see me on the other side of those websites. So yeah, would love to interact with folks.
Awesome. Thank you again. And to all the listeners out there, until next time, always remember, stay true to yourself, keep exploring, keep innovating, be practical, like Steve said, and always pursue your dream. Seize the day. Peace out.